It is dusk. We shall
Most of them out here, and today we've got a quick confederation guide for Tyrion or Etain playing as Alith Anar. Now when I say quick, you have to play through about probably 30 minutes of gameplay if you want to follow this guide in order to get Tyrion. Just on average. I'm going to obviously fast forward it, so you won't have to listen to that much on the guide. But I do have to still explain multiple turns of stuff. You can auto-resolve pretty much all the battles. Maybe only have to fight one of them. So it's pretty quick if you want to follow this guide and try it out. Just a disclaimer, this is not necessarily the most powerful start for Alith Anar or the fastest way to win the game. This is strictly a guide on the quickest or fastest way to confederate Tyrion. Start with this attack and occupy Bleakhold Fortress. You can auto-resolve the battle, no problem. After the battle, you don't need most of those units anymore. You can disband everything except for the Shadow Walkers. Those other units will just cost you money and sort of slow you down. This can make it a little bit more dangerous that Xarion will attack you, the green faction up to your north. Move outside of the settlement is probably the safest way. So if he does attack, at least you can retreat, so you're not trapped inside the settlement. Or you can just not disband those units and keep them for a bit longer, just so that he's less likely to attack you. Either way, make sure you start recruiting 3 units of Shadow Walkers and choose the Reaver Patrol's commandment for the Black Coast. Now, Shadow Warriors may actually be the better strategic choice for the game in general, as they probably do about as much damage for their ammo, and they're cheaper, and they only take 1 turn to recruit instead of 2. And this strategy may actually work with Shadow Warriors as well. But I use Shadow Walkers specifically because, and this is one of Alith Anar's specific things that's great about him, they're like a tier 4 unit. They're very powerful, they're very expensive. I think they cost about 300 gold per turn in upkeep. And Alith Anar gets a 50% cost reduction in them. So basically, they're one of the highest tier units that you can recruit on turn 1 for any faction, and he gets one of the biggest discounts of any legendary lord that you can get with them. So it basically gives him the largest potential to raise his faction strength to the highest possible level with only 1 stack, without incurring the extra 15% penalty, supply line penalty that you got on legendary for having a 2nd stack. So yeah, so he's kind of got the highest potential faction strength power of any legendary lord early in the game, I think, and that helps you a lot with your confederations. Turn 3, you continue recruiting more Shadow Walkers. Last turn you had already recruited your Hand of the Shadow Crown assassin and sent him off after Lockyer. So now you don't need that commandment anymore, so you can change your commandment to Rally a Citizen Militia. That just means you have the potential to hire 4 of your Shadow Walkers per turn in future, and they'll get +1 experience level as well. Oh, this is very important. On the way to assassinate Lockyer, your Hand of the Shadow Crown needs to drop by Lothern and make contact with Tyrion as soon as possible. You need to get that diplomatic contact with Tyrion so you can start upping your relations. Now that you've recruited a few units and the garrison of Bleakhold Fortress is recovered, there should be less chance that Xarion will attack you. So you might want to just move back into the settlement just to slow down that rebellion that's coming. Recruit as many units of Shadow Walkers as you can. If you don't have enough money to recruit 4, just recruit 3, that's fine. This is not part of the guide, but I always like to research a 2nd tier 1 technology, just because there's a couple of turns faster than the tier 2 research, so you can get your 3 researches to unlock the Invocation of Vol a bit quicker and get your magic item. Turn 6, your Hand of the Shadow Crown should discover Etain, and you can make diplomatic contact with Tyrion. You want to get trade agreement initially with Tyrion, just to start off the diplomatic contact. You may not be able to get a non-aggression pact with him, but you want to just take every agreement that you can as soon as you can get them, and that'll keep buffing up his relations one by one. Even take defensive alliances and everything. Just don't take an alliance with anyone else, and perhaps don't even risk a non-aggression with anyone else until you've confederated Tyrion. But you may also want to make a payment to him to try to buff his relationship faster initially, but I don't normally do it straight away on turn 6, so just make sure that I can recruit enough Shadow Walkers first, because you might be tight for money until you fight the first battle against the rebels. have trade with Tyrion, it'll give you vision on the other high elves, and you can get trade agreements with all of them. I usually take trade agreements with everyone I can, and maybe try to get just a non-aggression with Avalon as well, although I don't take a defensive alliance with Avalon until after I've gotten Tyrion. This guide is pretty reliable. You always get Tyrion pretty fast when you do this. One of the only things that can really stuff it up is if you take a alliance with both Tyrion and Avalon, and then Tyrion happens to go to war with Avalon, and then you're stuck with a diplomatic penalty to them. Okay, this is kind of the only really tricky part of the guide. You have to sort of manage when Xarion's going to come down and attack Bleakhold Fortress versus when the rebellion is going to happen. And ideally you want to have enough units to be able to defeat the rebellion and then come back and defeat Xarion. So around this time when you've got about 12 to 14 units is when you want to do it. So in this case, I'm going to move out of Bleakhold Fortress just to accelerate the rebellion a little bit. So it'll happen in 2 turns, and then I'm going to start recruiting as many more units as I can in that 2 turns, so I can just get up to 14 units.
I think not.
Now, at this point, also, you want to be monitoring your diplomacy every turn. You can increase your relations with these other factions a little bit if you like. Try to get trade agreements and non-aggressions, etc. As I said, don't take alliances with anyone else except Tyrion, because if you have to break an alliance, that'll ruin your diplomacy. And keep trying to take every agreement you can get with Tyrion, and possibly put some gifts towards him if you can afford it. Now, if you'd been able to recruit enough units so you're strong enough and you stayed within reinforcement range of Bleakhold Fortress, Xarion should not have attacked by now, so you should still have that there. And now you've got a good-sized army to be able to take out the rebels, and you should be just in range to be able to attack them if you'd moved to the edge of the reinforcement range for Bleakhold Fortress. You can easily auto-resolve this battle, but I like to fight it manually so I don't wipe them out, so I can get a few extra battles to get more experience on Alith Anar. And also, if you sort of stay down here a little bit longer, it's more likely to lure Xarion down to attack Bleakhold Fortress. Also, you just want to make sure that you don't take too many casualties.
As you say.
The battle should be pretty easy. I like to set up a double line of Shadow Walkers in the riverbed. You are shooting uphill, but I like the unimpeded view, and you've got room to kite backwards into the riverbed if you need it. Once the battle begins, Alith Anar can cast Mislead to create a ghostly image of himself to sort of distract and slow down the enemy a little bit, to give your archers a little bit more time to fire. You can also use Alith Anar to tank briefly if needed. Try to kill the Lord when you're farming rebels, because you'll get a little bit extra gold for killing the Lord, and they'll respawn a new Lord for you to kill next turn. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite quick enough and she got away this time. After the battle, I like to go into force march and move around behind the rebels so that I can drive them back up north next turn when I attack them again.
Not one Druki on Nagareth.
Once you get to this point, you won't have any more time to recruit before you attack Xarion to kill him, so you may as well spend any additional money on pumping up relations with Tyrion if you haven't already bribed him and started off the process of getting non-aggression packs and alliances. If the small gift cost is fairly low, just buy multiples of it, as many as you can afford.
As you say.
Next turn, attack the rebels again. I like to fight it manually. You can auto-resolve it if you don't want to get the second battle out of it. It should be pretty easy, pretty much the same fight as previously. Fighting these extra battles will give Alith Anar a little bit of extra experience. I like to use this in the red line to buff his archer's combat stats. If you fought the first battle manually, then follow up and just auto-resolve the second one to wipe out the rest of the rebel army. Now, moving back towards Bleakhold Fortress and save enough movement to go into ambush stance. Hopefully you've, even with ambush stance, you've still got enough movement to attack Bleakhold Fortress next turn. If your ambush holds, then Xarion should attack and occupy Bleakhold Fortress. If your ambush doesn't hold and he sees you, then he'll probably sack it and then retreat, and then you'll have to chase him. So I find it's actually easier if he just occupies Bleakhold Fortress, and then I can kill him next turn easily. Auto-resolve if Xarion attacks Bleakhold Fortress as planned. Next turn, attack Bleakhold Fortress and wipe out Xarion. If you've got enough troops, you should be able to just auto-resolve this, no problem. If it is a bit close and you have to fight it, you can just move all of your Shadow Walkers as a group and just kite them. They can fire while moving, so just keep kiting backwards, take out the enemy's cavalry and archers first. After the battle, continue recruiting as many Shadow Walkers as you can. You don't really face any more threats now, but you just want to pump up your faction strength as much as you can to increase your confederation power. Winning this battle will complete the mission to kill Xarion, which will award you with a good amount of influence and also some money. Sometimes it will also give you a buff to relations to High Elves. This is another one of the key things that makes Alith Anar so powerful at Confederation, because you can then use that influence that you just gained from the mission to increase your relations with Tyrion. If Xarion didn't attack Bleakold Fortress, or if he sacked it and then retreated out of your attack range, you'll have to chase him down. You might have to go up into his territory even. You can use ambush stance, which Alith Anar is quite effective at, to sort of lure him in, and eventually you should be able to kill him. Keep checking your diplomacy with Tyrion every turn. Keep trying to take any sort of agreement you can get, defensive alliance, military alliance, they'll push up the relations more. And if you're worried your relations aren't high enough, you can maybe even give him some more additional gifts. But usually it's not really necessary once you get enough faction strength. On this run, I get the Confederation on turn 13 with only 17 units in of Alith Anar's army. So I could have actually still recruited another 3 more Shadow Walkers in his army to push up the strength even more, the faction strength. And the faction strength is really important. Like, he won't get offered the Confederation until you get up to a certain faction strength. But you don't necessarily have to be stronger than the other faction, but you do have to have sufficient faction strength.
I will weigh what you have to say.
You can see in this example, Tyrion's actually strength rank 1, and I'm only strength rank 60, but I still get the Confederation. In this example, I got the Confederation on turn 13. It is possible to get it a little bit earlier, maybe. It's quite commonly you'll get a little bit later, but using this method, I pretty much always get the Confederation by around turn 20, maybe at the latest 25. Note here too that Tyrion's not been defeated. He's not in a wounded state. His army is healthy. Alistair's also got an army that's not been defeated. So certainly you could potentially get it even earlier if Tyrion did get defeated. Then the faction strength, you wouldn't need as high of a faction strength perhaps. But yeah, this shows that he doesn't need to be defeated. Even when he's got a faction strength much higher, much better than yours, you can still confederate him. So just to recap what I think the key factors here are. One is your faction strength. So you need to have a high faction strength. You don't need to be higher than them, but if you don't have a high enough faction strength, you won't get the Confederation. You do need to have a high enough faction strength. Alith Anar can get a very high faction strength with 1 stack by building Shadow Walkers. Might also work with Shadow Warriors. I haven't tried it. 2, your relationship with Tyrion. Now here again, Alith Anar's got some advantages. When he completes the quests for assassinating his assassination targets, he can potentially get a buff that gives him plus 20 relations to all High Elves, which will apply to Tyrion. And he gets influence, which he can use to just directly increase his relation with Tyrion. And those are sort of in addition to things that any other faction could get. Now, the third factor, and I think this is the main one that is the reason why a lot of people have problems with confederating, particularly Tyrion, is the great power penalty. Now, the great power penalty quite often only appears small. It might only be -5, -10 to relations, but I think it's weighted much more heavily in confederations. That's just my theory anyway. I don't really understand or pretend to understand how confederations work exactly, but that seems to be the different thing that seems to help in this situation. You just don't conquer anything. If you go out and set about winning the game by conquering territory, your great power penalty would go up slightly, and then you'll find it much harder to confederate. So here you can see that instead of virgin white Etain Tyrion and and Alistair, we've got Chad, Black, Nagarith, Tyrion, and Alistair, which I'm sure you'll agree are far superior. So that's what it's all about. Hopefully this guide helps you to get all your confederations done quickly and easily. You can just continue on with this and you should find it pretty easy to confederate all of the high elves that you've got access to. Just keep your great power penalty small. You might even want to abandon Alith Anar's starting territory and just move to Etane, so you can keep that great power penalty down to only -5, and then you should find it easy to confederate Alariel as soon as your confederation comes off cooldown, and then confederate Teclis, and then confederate Eltharion. In each case, just keep your faction strength up as high as possible and your great power penalty or your territory control down as low as possible. If your great power penalty goes up, you can still confederate. It'll just take a little bit longer. You'll just have to pay more money and that sort of thing. I haven't actually tried this, but as an alternate method, it should be possible to first confederate Calidor instead of Tyrion, and then when you confederate Calidor, apparently you get vision over Imrik, so then you could confederate Imrik second, abandon all those territories so your great power penalty stays low, and then kind of confederate Tyrion and go from there if you want to do a collect them all campaign. Anyway, if you want to check out other videos like this, please check out my channel, and you can subscribe to be notified about future videos if you want. That's all I got. Thanks, guys.